That was the most Okay. There's going to be hecklers. You need to make it intelligible. And if you can't be funny, be quick. Okay? Otherwise, we're good to go. Look at you.
Look at you.
I can, but I'll get the film afterwards. You might not know, but years and years ago, Dave Sharp, Dave McQueen and myself tried to set up an IGDA chapter in Scotland round about 2000, 2001, and the three of us met in Stirling twice and looked at each other over a big table and went, maybe there are only 3 game developers. But we had chosen Stirling because it was equally inconvenient for everyone, so maybe not. Right, tonight, the IGDA tends to be quite a lot of developers talking about development issues and really taking the whole business of making a game and trying to make it more transparent and accessible and share with the wider community the problems that each individual company or each individual has faced as they try to bring things to market. Mark did a fantastic job with Doctor Who Mazes of Time. I think that was very well done. You can clap him later. Right. No other applause during my talk, thank you. But I don't really come from a development background. Yes, I've worked with developers and publishers and a whole bunch of other companies in between. But as you can tell from, the slightly better cut suit jacket, Florence and Fred, very reasonable. I actually come from the marketing side of things. And tonight, I'd like to address, in a sharing and collaborative way, a number of issues which I've seen raised again and again within the games industry at events and conferences like E3, GDC, Gamescom, and pretty much every sort of platform where developers can get together and fucking whinge. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present game developers. Please, for me, just now and again, stop being shit. Before we proceed, who am I to stand up and say this to you? Well, if you'd been at the last meeting, you would realise we had actually addressed this. Check with any of the guys who are in Edinburgh, you will find out exactly who I am. Somebody, some lanky, open headphoned wearing student with his jeans halfway down his arse, actually said, "Who are you?" at an IGDA meeting in Scotland. So I thought the ideal thing to do would be to... No, it really is. I'm not making this up. So my name's Brian Baglow. I, for the last 18 years, have done PR marketing primarily. I've also lectured, I've started ScottishGames.net. I clearly don't get out enough. But my primary job, my day job if you will, is PR and marketing. So in my head, that's what I do. Don Draper, ladies and gentlemen. A hard-drinking, hard-womanising, chain-smoking, and yet thoroughly effective marketing type guy who takes the advertising agency and kicks it up its arse every single day between whiskies and shaggy. Sadly, I work in the games industry with developers. And developers who hear the word PR tend to think more like this. A slightly creepy gentleman, albeit with a very fetching hat, and I do suit top hats, but one who just goes around and tries to steal your joy and bruise it in a number of unsettling ways. But, be that as it may, this is what I do. So, why am I picking on game developers? What have you guys ever done to really deserve a bit of a shoeing? Well, every year at GDC, they have a panel which is called the Developer Rant, where a number of really, really well-known game developers stand up and fucking moan about why nobody loves them, and nobody treats them well, and nobody takes them seriously, and how publishers are horrible, you can't make any money out of this, and just generally go on and on and on about how everything's terrible. At a developer conference, you can imagine it doesn't really get a lot of boos. However, if you've ever sat in the audience and you've had anything to do with the wider industry, instead of inspiring, inspirational and confrontational presentations from some of the key thinkers in the industry, what you tend to get is something that basically resembles a bunch of babies whining on, a little bit. And I say this with all due respect to the Greg Kosteckians of this world, but seriously, come on guys, let's face facts, it's not that bad. We work in an industry that makes games, okay? Seems fair, it seems obvious, but I think it needs to be stated. We've just come out of a period where if you wanted to make games, you had to rely on one of these devices, and you had to have 100 million up front, 50 million pounds worth of development budget. You needed relationships with Sony, Microsoft or Nintendo. You needed access to the dev kits, you needed distribution deals so you could get your games out into the market. You had to work with one of the great big publishers. The big publishers would take away your IP like a bully stealing a dummy from a tiny baby in a sandpit. And generally it was a bit rubbish. But even that was an advance from the period where you had to make your own cassette tapes and flog them out the back of a magazine. Or it was a real computer! I think there's only myself and Mr. Farley in the audience who ever worked in the mobile industry when nobody took it seriously. I'm not doing this for passion anymore, it's spite. And even that was a big advance on this bad boy. Anyone know what that is? I expect at least one person to know.
It's an Amstrad GX4000.
Sold even more badly than the Atari Jaguar. It was just an awful, awful piece of shit. I can't watch The Apprentice because every time Lord Sugar comes on screen, I want to say, "You approved it!" There was no excuse. So that's where we've been. You know, it's like, it was hard. You had to work at a great big development company. You had to be a very tiny cog in a great big wheel. And you had to do work for hire, for the most part. You were stuck doing the franchises or the titles that your studio was known for doing. There was no way out. However, we're no longer in the past or the present anymore. We're now in the future. And I can prove this. Welcome to Dundee 2013. As you can see, the bridge has fallen into slight disrepair. But at least you can get a Coke. Which is always good. So we're now looking at a market which is very, very different. We have proper smartphones. Seriously, that was a concept phone from Sony Ericsson in 2003. You'll notice phones don't look like that. But, hey, you know, it was Ericsson. There is a reason they merged with Sony. We now have thin clients and server-based games, big online, multiplayer type games, which are going to truly revolutionise things. Hands up everyone who thinks Gaikai and OnLive will work. About 3 people. Excellent. You're all wrong, it just might take longer. And of course we have the appearance of the almighty tablet. We have devices which are... Can you explain to the rest of the group why that's funny?
Not really. No, let's continue. Yeah.
It's an HP touchpad. I took out the iPad and put in the HP touchpad only this morning. That's how topical we are. Dara, oh fucking brain. BAFTA Games Awards, I think so. But we're now dealing with an industry where you can go out and you can make games, you can create projects for all of these different platforms. You no longer have to suck up to Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo or BBC Worldwide, who are lovely people. Lovely people, I've heard. So it's totally different. And what this gives you is a complete new opportunity. Okay? When I started, you had to work inside a studio. There was no option. Anyone who went out and started a game on their own, like the redoubtable John Hare, let's say. Has anyone heard of John Hare? Holy f... Has anyone heard of Sensible Soccer? Either I'm very old or Abertay isn't doing its job. I'm telling Gregor. But you have a whole new opportunity. What it means is that you, the very cool, relaxed game developer in your loft-style studio, with a bunch of guys who are just hanging about with their headphones on playing Quake, are now far, far closer than ever before. You don't have to deal with the big publishers, you don't have to deal with the distributors. You are now within touching distance of a huggable MILF. I'd be stopping her in the vegetable, eh? I don't get out of that. So, it's all good. You guys, you game guys, you people who make stuff, can go out and make games and get them into the hands of people who want to play them. And yet somehow, whenever I go to an event or whenever I'm talking to game developers, it would seem that perhaps the opportunity is maybe not as obvious as I seem to think it is. It could be that, maybe we're all missing something or just not communicating quite the same way. Because the cold, hard fact, guys, is much as you love it, much as you love your programming, much as you're mad for getting to grips with your Photoshop and your Maya, it's like you're no longer developers. Or, more properly, you're no longer just developers. You have to be publishers. That's physical media. That's what we used to have to use when we wanted to publish a game. You have to be marketers. And check the suits and the veneer smiles on that page. These are the people I have to interact with on a daily basis. You can see why I come to see you guys so often. You have to be distributors and figure out how you're going to get your game into the hands of people. And then, of course, last and most awesomely, you have to be a PR guy. Your own PR guy. That's Mark Bukowski. He's quite cool. He owns half of London and New York. It's true, Max Clifford wouldn't even pick up the phone to him. But you have, if you're doing games, you now have to do all of these functions. Because the sad fact is, there's nobody else out there to do it for you. You're no longer developers, you're entrepreneurs. Okay? Which means, by and large, you have to run your own company. Okay? You don't have to stand up in front of Lord Sugar, although anyone who does, and doesn't leap over the desk to try and stab him or slice him, see me afterwards. Or Dragon's Den, but nobody watches that. But it means that you've now got to go out and actually take your game concept, and then once you've finished working on it, you're not done. You've then got to take it out and make people play it, and let people buy it, and make sure people like it, and make sure they bloody well know that it exists. Let me throw an image up on screen and we'll see how many people know this one. This would be Notch, also known as Marcus, who comes from
Sweden.
Thank you, a resident Icelandic.
Finnish.
That's all the same.
Stabbing slice 60 meat after.
I know he's Swedish, and I can prove it because when he had finished making that little game that everyone seems to quite enjoy, he then had to take it out onto the market, and he then had to make sure people knew it was out there. And no, not Notch, not good old development focused Notch, he wouldn't do that. Now, that may have been true at some point, but as soon as Minecraft started getting some traction, his thoughts changed from C++ and fighting Bethesda at Quake for ownership of the Scrolls franchise, to several other things. As soon as he started making money, do you know what Notch did? He imported Sweden's first flock of peacocks. And he bought a crown. And he commissioned a solid gold unicorn.
Is the peacock thing true?
Yes.
I seen peacocks in Stockholm about 2 years ago.
Well, though they would have been his. Amazon do them. But so it is possible. Even if you have an affection for hats and unfortunate facial hair, you can still make more money than Jesus. But, and I'm going to hear this from several people, not only tonight, but on Twitter and on Facebook from certain individuals over the next few days, who are going to say, but Brian, he didn't do any hype. It was a good game, so it naturally rose to the top of the heap. People recognised it for the sheer work of genius, and it is a work of genius, that it is. And real games, good games, don't need hype. To which I would respond, no. This is from Wikipedia, right? So, a large part of the success of the game they put down to our very own Scotland Road at the Daily Record, big up Scotland, who was an early adopter, shall we say. But this is just press coverage. You know, you cannot make a game and punt it out and then just sit and hope for the best. If you build something, no matter how good it is, hands up everyone who makes games. Hands up everyone who makes shit games. Right, hands up just those people who make good games. Well, okay. A little more diverse than I expected. But the thing is, your natural genius and creativity is going to be pitched against everyone else's natural genius and creativity. So unless you plan, like Evie, to go around and stab all of your competitors, I'd watch Walking Out, Mark. Quarrel versus Doctor Who. You're still going to have to do more than just sit and wait for it all to happen. There are now over 500,000 apps on Apple's App Store. 500,000. Many of them to do with farting and running. I don't know. I've used Runkeeper once, didn't much like it, so now I fart. But, you know, it's obvious to me that you guys will be number ones. We have several number one selling developers in the audience tonight. Paul?
That's right.
Did we say thank you for the
Was
sponsorship
that
money? I don't know.
So it's 3.
You see, if only there was some way to find out things like this. There's bound to be a solution. But sitting and hoping for the best is not a business plan. I did warn you, Ellie.
Sorry, Brian's here.
I'm okay.
You're brilliant, Brian.
Oh, thank you. I like Ellie. You can't just pump a game out and then hope for the best, all right? With the best will in the world, your backers, your funders, the people who are giving you money, or if you're self-funding it, you know, your own conscience might tell you that you simply can't rely on that working. There are a lot of really clever people out there making games. You just can't do it. Now I'm aiming this at the people who are here tonight who want to make games and who want to do this for a living. Okay? There are several people in the development community in Scotland who don't want to do this as a living. They're doing this for love. It's a hobby. It's a way of expressing their genius and realising their art! If that's the case, then I have nothing more to say to you, because your soul is very beautiful. And frankly, you should sit at home and, you know, enjoy being a beautiful person. But for the rest of you who actually fancy doing this and getting some money out of it at some point, you're going to have to bite the bullet and look at marketing. Okay? If it helps, I will hand out pictures of Don Draper later. And you can take them home and imagine that that guy is looking after your marketing. But there are some real, very, very common misconceptions about marketing that I'm here tonight to dispel. And it's things that I've heard from developers, independent, part of studios, part of big studios, time and time again, throughout the last sort of couple of decades in the games industry. So marketing isn't only required for bad games, okay? Good games need it too. Who's heard of Portal 2? Yeah, they didn't shut up and let you stumble over that. Anyone looking forward to BioShock Infinite? Yeah, how did you hear about that? Fairies? No. Have you seen the gameplay footage from E3? Oh my god, guess what? That's marketing. Marketing isn't fundamentally evil, okay? A lot of people think it is. A lot of people think marketing is similar to basically, giving money to sex traffickers. It's something that goes on, you know that some people are involved in it. Frankly, you would just rather just put some money in the hat and walk away. It's not evil, it's a necessary business function. It's not distasteful. I cannot believe the number of people who have spoken to me and said, yes, but polite people wouldn't market a game. It's like masturbation. It goes on, but we don't talk about it. And it's certainly not something only publishers should do, okay? As we covered in several slides ago, you have to be the publishers now, okay? The fact that you are now separated from the consumer by a distribution channel means that you have to do the publishing stuff too, okay? If you're not doing it, you're not self-publishing. You're self-abusing. And it's not optional, okay? It's not something that would be nice if you could spare the time. It's not something that would be good if we had left time at the end of it. And it's not something that you can maybe think about. It's once we get around to our own original IP games. It's something that you have to do if you want to sell your game. And it's not inherently expensive. Marketing does not mean having to take out full-page adverts in the back of the Financial Times or advertising all over, Britain's Got Talent or The X Factor or Big Brother. Right? Marketing comes in many different forms, many of which you can do yourselves. Seriously, I'll come to that in a second. And it's not out of your control. A lot of people assume that taking on a marketing person or employing a PR company is, again, a little like going to the Happy Satan daycare centre, handing over little Alice, and then hoping like hell at the end of the day that she might be okay. It's your game, it's your budget, it's your campaign. You can control it. You just need to be aware of how it works. And it's definitely not a black art. Now, I hold my hand up here. Most PR and marketing people, when they sit down with developers, get a little gleam in their eye and start throwing things out like early adopters, key opinion formers, demographics, it's like tribes, audiences. And as you start to shrink back against your chair and think, oh my God, what have I done? It's like they start jotting little sums in their exquisite moleskin notepads and wonder how much they can take you for. It's not complicated. As Paul will tell you, if it was complicated, I couldn't do it. And marketing is very, very definitely not dependent upon advertising. We have a really good example locally. We all know about Real-Time Worlds. We all know that it was a tragedy what happened to them. They spent an absolute fortune trying to recruit people, and it was all advertising driven. I would maintain to this day that if they'd done a spot of PR and told people how cool the place was and actually shown people inside and a bit more about the game, they would have had people flocking to join them. Or at least it would have been slightly easier, or maybe not cost them as much per new recruit. There are loads of other ways to do it. So what is marketing? Well, let's have a look. Marketing is simply communicating externally. Anytime you talk to somebody outside your studio, outside your company, you're marketing, all right? Regardless of how that happens. Marketing itself is the stuff you pay for. Advertising is an obvious one. Sponsorship, thank you TAG. TAG have many games for iOS and Android, which are selling. Marketing, you see? So that's all the stuff that you pay for. PR is the stuff that you don't. PR is the stuff where you go out and you ask people nicely and persuade them that, perhaps you might like to try Doctor Who Mazes of Time, because I've heard a lot of people say it's pretty bloody good. And I have to say, Paul is a cool guy, so anything he's involved in has to be great. See, that's PR. You see the difference? And it's social. The social side of things didn't exist when I started doing this, and it's great, because I no longer have to deal with Ponzi agencies in London or give people huge chunks of my budget to go and say things to people. I can now talk directly to the folk who are going to go out and buy the game, or to the journalists, or to VCs, or whoever I need to talk to, I can now reach through the awesome power of the internet. It's great. All you need to do is get off your arse and actually do it. And don't be scared. Communication is a good thing, all right? And there's a lot of misconceptions about it. Communication and PR does not necessarily mean screaming tabloid hype, okay? A lot of people assume that if you sign up for PR, all you're going to get is like Sun headlines and you're going to be dragged through the press. And it's just going to be screaming. The equivalent of standing next to somebody with a megaphone in their ear and going, "We're great!" It's not that. PR is no longer about talking to journalists. When I started, you had no choice. I had to go down to Bath on company expense and talk to the people at Edge and take them out for lunch at company expense. To a chip shop, DMA with me. And you had to be very nice and you had to be very subservient and you had to play the game. Not the game that you went to show them, the sort of the PR journalist game. There were lots of things behind skips and car parks. A long time ago, I'm not proud. But these were the only people that you could use to reach the audience. So you had to be nice to them. And then the internet happened. And the blogs started coming along and they were desperate for content. Because instead of publishing once a month with a 6 to 8 week lead time, they needed stuff all the time. And they were happy to get stuff from you because they could cut and paste and throw it up. And it was fantastic. And now, you can go out and talk to people directly, as long as you do it well. Not like the PR agency employed by Take-Two to do Duke Nukem. That's a bad example, but that's why you employ professionals. So communication is good. And PR is not that difficult. PR certainly, and I'm addressing this to every single fucking one of you, PR is not a review. Every company does this. All of them. The game's not finished, we're not showing it off. When the game comes out, then we'll talk about it. Stupid, wrong, bad developers. Start early, start really early, start now. If you have an idea for a game, go out and talk about it. Right? And talk to everybody. I've got a really good idea for a game. I'm getting together with some friends, we're going to do this, it's going to be totally awesome. And show your work. Show some concept stuff. Show wireframes. The more in development stuff that you show, the more you're going to get the hardcore, the actual gamers on your side. The entire games media exists on an endless stream of materials, collateral, from your artists, from your programmers, from your animators, from your writers, from your designers. Stick it their way. What else are you going to do with it? Stick it on a DVD and forget about it for the next 10 years. Actually, that's not a bad idea. The guy's coming up to do the original GTA. I've got DVDs full of stuff. But I did send it out to journalists at the time and talk about it. And there is a very, very good reason for doing this. It generates ongoing interest. Okay? And it makes your life easier. I'll explain how. Here is a graph which I created using an online service for 8 to 14-year-olds. Fuck Excel. Right? Let's assume your game comes out in November. Okay? But we're going to start talking about it in January. And we're going to say, hey everyone, we're working on a cool new game. This is what it's called, and here's a logo. February, we maybe changed the logo, maybe things aren't working out so well. And then we go out and we talk about it, and we talk about it, and we release new material, and we talk about it, and we do previews, and we do hands-on, we do loads of stuff, all the way before the game comes out. Because when you get to review, guess what happens to your opportunities for press coverage? They drop like a fucking stunned falcon. Once your game is out on the market, the press loses interest the week after. Okay? So you've missed all of that, and you're hoping that that's going to be really, really good. Sorry, Craig, am I moving about too much?
Yeah.
We should have blocked it earlier. That's a technical acting term. So this is when your game comes out, right? And you get reviews. You've got a decent guy, you've got a good idea, you've talked to Slide to Play, you've talked to Touch Arcade, Pocket Gamer, all the guys that you're talking to. If you're doing something for the PSP Vita, well, God help you, but Somebody will cover it. Probably TechCrunch when you go down the tubes, but that's another whole other lecture. But when your game comes out, you'll get some reviews. Your game is out, people want to review it. But as soon as the game has been reviewed, media stop writing about it. Unless you've got updates, unless you've got some really nice cool stuff coming out after that. But once your game has been reviewed, your opportunities in the press go way down. Really quite big. It's a huge drop-off. And this is what I don't understand. And maybe you guys can sort of help me, because you're gambling everything. You're gambling weeks or months or maybe even years of work on that one opportunity in the press. One, okay? And the chances are that the review is going to be carried out by a journalist. Okay? Journalists are not fair and equal-minded writing machines. Journalists are humans. Journalists are people who really like games but weren't clever enough to get into development. There's a lot of frustration out there. Okay? And imagine, just for a crazy second, this being the run-up to the party season, that your journalist has been out the night before and isn't feeling great. Okay? Or he split up with his lovely orange girlfriend. What? Or that maybe he just really doesn't like your type of game. It's a match 3 puzzle featuring fruit. Good luck. If I was doing your PR, I would have spoken to the media channel, the outlet, the website, the magazine up front, and said, who are you going to get to review it? No, don't give it to him. He only likes first-person shooters, specifically those made by Epic. And he's 14 and he can't write. Perhaps we can come to some arrangement. I will give you exclusive things, and you will give it to the nice girl who comes in and interns for you, and who plays things like Plants vs. Zombies and Bejeweled. But you're gambling your entire project on that one review being awesome. Oh, are you sure you want to do this? We're getting to the good bit as well. So you've got to do your work up front. You have to do your work up front. However, and I know what you're going to say, it's difficult. I know it's difficult, because it requires doing stuff other than making the game. But here are the opportunities that you get when you go out and actually start talking. You get a chance to announce the game and do some news and get it out there. Now, GameSpot, IGN, Ziff Davis Net, 1UP, Eurogamer, all of the big networks have directories of games. So if you inform them that you have a game in production, it will go up on their database, which instantly makes you more Googleable. And that's not a word to say after your second pint of Guinness. That's why I'm drinking Tennent's. So you can announce it up front, and you can announce it really early. We are working on a new game. Here is a logo. Okay, that is a news story that a journalist can cope with. That is, seriously, one story at a time, people. One. And then after that, send out some work in progress. It's been a couple of weeks. We've got things going on. Here's some initial concept art. Here's some characters. Do you think our skirt's too short? BBC thinks it's too long. We don't know. But send stuff out. The games press prospers. It needs your materials to survive. Then you go out and you get previews for alpha. Okay, you know, it's not feature complete, but it's holding together. It's like maybe coincides with one of the big shows. So you're down at E3 or you're out at Dare to be Digital and Pro to Play. Go and grab a journalist, sit them down and say, okay, unofficial, but have a bit of a play. Then you get the hands-on demo, or you produce a video, stick it up on YouTube, tell the world what you're doing, and you can start to get a lot of people interested. You know, a lot of the games that are coming out now, you no longer have to fall into the sort of the mindset that the big publishers did, that everything you pump out has to be really slick and well produced. The number of over-the-shoulder, handy-cam, sorry Craig, this sounds very insulting, low-res, kind of crude recordings, unlike tonight, which is marvellous, is booming. You don't have to, People want to see what you're up to. People want to see what your game's going to be like. Right? If you're recording it with a webcam on your PC right next to somebody else's PC, get something out. It doesn't have to be polished. It has to be heartfelt and it has to be transparent. And then talk to people. Go and do interviews. We're doing games for the PSP Vita. Does anyone want to know why? We got a free one. Seemed like a good idea. Our lecturers making us do it. Or you get a studio profile. It's like the wonderful people at Tag Games recently sponsored the IGDA Scotland meeting. We go and talk to them and find out why. But again, the games media lives on this kind of thing. The more coverage, the more information you get out there, the higher up Google you go, and we live in a Googleable world. You see? Every time. If you're not on the front page, in the top half of the front page, you don't exist. If people aren't stumbling across your game, you're cutting your own throats. Dead simple. And you do all of that, all of it, months or weeks if it's a very short time. Clearly the DARE teams should have been doing this from week 1. I did tell Elaine, she left. You'll never know. You'll never know. But before you go anywhere near the review, please put information out, okay? And again, you know what? You can choose how you do it. It doesn't have to be through the proper media. You don't have to go to Edge and beg for an audience or beg for an interview. You don't have to sit on Twitter for 8 hours a day. But if you don't, then make sure you've either got somebody in-house who can or wants to, or hire someone who does. Any 14-year-old girl who sits on Facebook 8 hours a day can be bribed to say something nice about you once an hour. I hadn't announced that business yet, but I was kicked out of Dragon's Den as well. Oh, David. Was it because I criticised
I'm spoken out of disgust.
Fuck you, buddy! If you're not offending people, you're not doing your job. Use social media. It's there. I don't care if you don't get Twitter. I don't care if I don't want to hear what people have for breakfast every other hour. If you're not on social media, then therefore you're not engaging with people in the way that they are choosing to see the internet. Therefore you are missing what people are saying about you, and you're taking away your opportunity to do anything about it should everything go tits up. Okay? Anyone heard of Left 4 Dead? Weird crowd you've got here tonight. Okay, Valve brought out Left 4 Dead. They said they were going to support it and do a lot of downloadable content in the months to follow. Then they announced Left 4 Dead 2 only a few weeks later, and the internet went up. Facebook group got thousands upon thousands of people harumphing and being angry from Manchester about the fact that they were doing Left 4 Dead 2 when they weren't going to support the first game properly, and it was all getting a bit nasty, with their usual aplomb and savoir-faire, and a bit of sang-froid, which is French. Valve responded by flying Gabe Newell, who, given the responses tonight, is the boss of Valve, which is a games company in Seattle, that's in America. Just trying to find my level. Flew him to the guy who started this Facebook group, flew him to his house and sat down with him with the laptop and went, here's Left 4 Dead 2, play it, you're the first person in the world to do so. Actually, Valve are quite good. But if you're not watching what's being said about you on Facebook and Twitter and all of these channels, then you lose any opportunity to interact with people who can either be your biggest fans or your greatest critics. And find your voice. Don't try and write proper formal... You might as well come in, David, I can see you. You don't have to try and write like a tabloid hack or write like some sort of, you know, jumped up PR person. Let your character come out. You're game developers, okay? Venture capitalists don't take you seriously as it is. Have a bit of fun, okay? It's like, if things are going wrong, admit it. But admit it in a way where you go, well, this didn't work, so what we're doing is this, okay? Never let the programmers at it. That was shit, and that didn't work. And James was off on holiday, so that's never going to get fucking through. The artists are better, but why more? share everything. Share everything. If you've created something that's not going to go in the game, share it anyway. And tell people why it's not going in the game. Okay? You're showing you're working. You're giving people an insight into what you're doing. You're making the process transparent. If you do everything inside one huge, great, big black box, at the end of the process, nobody cares, and you're going to have to start the process anyway and give yourself days or weeks to do it in rather than years or months. Okay? And here's the big thing. And again, I'm talking to you guys because I try very hard to update my little website, scottishgames.net, about once a day if I can. And I write about the companies around here locally and who do things, release games or, you know, sign new deals or, you know, do anything interesting. And it gets read by politicians and organisations like Creative Scotland. Evening, Morgan. And a lot of people, okay, the guys at Edge read it, the guys at MCV read it, the guys at... everyone reads it. Why? Because we're awesome. And also, I'm the only person who does. But, you know, I try to email all of the companies that I write about and say, you've been blogged, I've written about your new game, or I've written about this new deal, or I've written about that, and send people a link. And at the bottom of every single post, you can like it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, do a +1 on Google. Guess how many companies do that?
7.
None. Good guess, but very, very few. I'm not going to say none. There are exceptions.
The link didn't work today, Ryan.
What link?
The Twitter link is broken.
No, it's a WordPress thing. It goes out with WordPress, not Scottish Games, but it's because it's WordPress who's sharing it. No, it's a WordPress thing. It's this internet thing, Paul. It's okay.
It's crazy,
have your tech guys explain it. It'll be good. It's management. But if anyone hands you coverage on a plate, use it. Okay? If somebody says something vaguely nice about your company or your game or you, then retweet it, post it. I didn't know if you saw that Rob Fahey on Games Industry mentioned me and said I wasn't the most miserable, talentless person in the games industry. Bonus. So anything that comes out of your communication, you feed back in and tell people that it's been working. Okay? It's a big virtuous circle. You see, I even beat myself to the punch there. However, and I know what you're going to say, does anyone want to say it for me? Okay, let's go through this. But if we go out and say things that early, wait. Concerned at the speed reading in this room. But if we go out and say things, people will steal our game. Oh no, we're all doomed. No, that's not strictly true. Let's be honest, okay? We live, as I say, in the internet age. So let's... ideas, you know the really, really cool idea that you had when you were at university and you think, I'm going to make that, but I'm going to make it in my own terms and I'm going to make millions and I'm going to have a flock of peacocks and I'm going to have 2 gold unicorns and I'm never, ever, ever going to go to Sweden because there's somebody there who's even rich. Let's assume for a sec that you're not alone. It's quite a large industry now. That's not E3. Seriously, that's Gamescom. Gamescom beat E3 last year. Who knew? But you can always tell that because there's a couple of Yoshis in there and a guy with fuck on his t-shirt. Well, nearly fuck, you know.
But where's Walden?
I'll leave this one up for you if you want at the end, right? Or we'll put it up on the blog. Either way, right? It's a big industry. There are lots of people doing this now. There are more students, there are more indie developers, there are more individuals. That's quite clever. Fuck you! ones standing up here doing this. There are a lot of people doing this. The chances are that your idea is already being worked upon, okay? You can have a really nice idea for a little game where you're a king caveman and you lead a little flock of, you know, non-controlled cavemen that follow you around all over the place, and you fight dinosaurs and you pick dinosaurs up and you take them back and you do all of this. Paul's looking depressed. At DMA we did this game, and it came out, it didn't even come out. We had it in development, it was going slowly, and then about a year later Pikmin came out. And it took all of our ideas and made them good. But let's assume that somebody else is working on exactly the same thing. So you need to get your idea out there early, people, because if you don't, you might get beaten to the punch. So tell people what you're working on, really. Yeah, even if it's an idea. Okay? If it's an idea and you need somebody who can either do art or programming, or you really, really need to find a producer just to, you know, focus your ideas and get you finished on time. I'm told that does happen. People need producers. They do. Let's say that if you make something like, let's go out on a limb here, Angry Birds. Let's say that if you make an Angry Birds, then 800 people are going to copy your idea. If you're making a tower defence game featuring fruit, let's assume that people aren't going to give a shit until you sell your first 10,000. That seem reasonable? Yeah? There's a huge amount of ideas out there, and the chances are somebody is working on something that's really, really similar to yours. And if they are, if something else comes out, right? Here's the nice bit. They might have done what every other game developer in the world does and kept it close to their chest and not shown anyone, and then gone, review it! If you've got 9 months of blog posts and tweets and, you know, evolution of your game showing that you were working on it all this time, everyone's going to go, oh my god, these guys just totally copied you. And you can go, I know, bastards. But you cannot, once the game's come out, going, oh, we were working on something so similar, until it's 18 years later and you're talking to a room full of people, and it's for comic effect. All so far, so good. But here's the good bit, right? And it is a good bit. It's a genuinely good bit. Nobody, right, and I'm going to repeat that for emphasis, nobody knows anything right now. And there are a lot of really big, really expensive conferences at really nice hotels all over Europe and America, where not just games people, not just interactive people or digital media people, but lots of business people get together and realise that they haven't a frigging clue what's going to happen in the next 5 years. The number of people who predicted Twitter coming was 2, and they started the company. And even then they were surprised. EA doesn't know what's going on, right? EA bought PopCap and is going out and buying companies like Playfish and everything to give it a foot in a market that it thinks might survive. But the main business of EA is going on as usual. You know, you're going to see your usual franchises. Okay, maybe they're moving FIFA onto the iPhone and the iPad, but they don't know what's going to happen in 5, 10 years. They don't even know what's going to happen in the next 18 months. Nintendo sure as hell don't know what's going on. Because they're stuck in a business model that in some ways is no longer relevant. And so they're running into all sorts of problems. So what does that mean? Where does that leave us? It means that it's all up for grabs, right? All of it is now open and it's accessible by smaller, more agile, thank you, Mark, companies, right? The business models, you know, a lot of the business models that are happening now, freemium didn't exist 3 years ago. You know, it was a wild idea that some people had in, you know, brainstorming sessions that were written up on whiteboards and then ignored. The audiences, I mean, who saw Facebook games, right? Who plays Farmville? No, seriously, hands up. Because I get a lot of requests. All right, it's all of my other friends on Facebook. Actually, it's Empires and Allies at the moment. Who has time? And the experiences those audiences have. It's no longer about a single serving session. Somebody doesn't have to sit down for an hour or 2 hours or 8 hours. It can now be 5 minutes. It can now be nothing to do with the game. You can have a meta game that actually sends you an email or a text or lets you interact it in a totally different way, depending on where you are and how you're accessing it. So even the experience, games are no longer going to be games, they're going to be interactive experiences. And you're all going to go, well, they're not real games, and I'm going to have to beat each and every one of you to death because you're missing the point. If you're not going to make these interactive experiences, it's going to be marketing companies, and then I shall have to jump off a bridge. Okay? You're creative geniuses, we established that. Shut up and make the games. If you don't want to make Farmville, make something better. And of course, this changes how you do everything with your players. Everything. Okay? It's up to you guys. Remember that obscure little software company, Valve, I mentioned? You know, they weren't happy sort of sticking things on discs and boxes on shelves in shops. So they created something called Steam, which seems to have worked out pretty well for them. They're a developer. They were a developer when they did that. They didn't hang around and go, well, maybe we'll make EA Cross. No. Now Gabe Newell strides around and it's boom, boom. Not because he's powerful, but because he needs to cut down on the carbs. Sorry, Gabe. If you're reading that, I would really like to do GDC next year, okay? But it means that everything's open, right? So you are in such a good position. It's going to be really scary. I'm not going to lie to you, it is going to be scary. Because now all of a sudden the comfortable guidelines and the comfortable boundaries and barriers that have formed the games industry for the last 18 odd years don't exist anymore. Okay? We've already spoken to Tag. Tag are going out and talking to BBC Worldwide. The BBC is a television company, not a games company, yet here they are doing games with one of our best and brightest young game developers who thoughtfully sponsored the IGDA Scotland. Is it another 2 mentions? Okay. It's going to be scary and it's going to be unexpected. We don't know.
Damn it.
Would you like to come up? We're down to about 2 hours until you can buy Quarrel. Other games from Tag are also available. 1 down. Nobody really knows. Is OnLive or Gaikai going to really change things? It might. There's a lot of uncertainty. Do we really have the broadband speeds? Probably not. Does that mean it's not going to happen? No. It might just take a little bit longer. Or they might find a different way of doing it that totally fucks everything up for everyone really quickly. But it beats getting a real job. Okay, you're doing computing, you're doing game design, you're doing something to do with computers. Okay, the chances are that banking or call centres or IT support or risk management, in my own case, is going to be the way that you have to go. Don't do it. Games can be a real career. Okay, it doesn't have to be the massive mega corporation anymore. You don't have to go out and be a very small cog. It's like all the artists in the audience, hands up. Whoa. Clearly they're at home mainlining heroin. And there's no point in putting your hand up if you're round the corner. I can't see you. But imagine being a texture artist. Imagine being a texture artist on Grand Theft Auto and sitting doing tarmac and brick and glass and tree bark and spit and blood and phlegm. Every day, that's your job. Admittedly, the fact that you own a solid gold Ferrari probably helps, but you don't have to do that. You can now go out and realise your own vision. It's no longer just the evil corporations anymore. That is EA's next purchase, by the way, so be very scared. Things have changed, okay? The future is yours, guys. You can go out and you can actually make it happen and you can do your games and you have an opportunity to not only do the games that you want, but actually change the industry of the future. So in conclusion, all I would ask you to do is shut the fuck up. And please stop whining, okay? It was much more difficult in my day. We had to code down mines and walk through snow that deep for an hour just to get there. It's, seriously, the games industry is more open and more exciting now than it has ever been. And if you can't make a go of it, if you can't have fun doing it, then go and get a real job. I mean, there are for people with your skills and undoubted talents. I can see many of you fulfilling one or some or all of these roles at some point in the future. Apart from Tag Games, of course, who will be making fabulous games well into the next century. And on that bombshell, I'll go away now.